first of all, a huge thank you, all of you, for coming today and supporting me. Writing this book has been something that I've wanted to do my whole life. Probably not writing about financial empowerment, to be fair, but I've always wanted to write a book, and I'm absolutely bowled over that I have, and delighted that you're all here to celebrate that with me. So just a little bit about She Can Prosper, because most of you know me in my day job, which is being a partner with St James's Place. But during my 30-year career, I have been so passionate about encouraging women to basically own their own financial shit and understand what they don't know when things go wrong. And in 2018, I sold my company, and I just had this thing niggling in my mind that I wanted to try and educate and empower women to sort of understand what they didn't know and to take action. And I was introduced to Georgia Holston, who's sitting on the front row, and her team came up with the design, which I love, and which is the heading of the book. And then, unfortunately, we went into lockdown, and my little dreams for She Can Prosper were sort of put on hold a little bit. We were doing a few online events, but nothing of any consequence. But during that period, I was introduced by someone who I work with at Sovereign to an amazing tribe of women called Sister Snog. And I'm really delighted that some of my sisters are here supporting me today. And in the course of joining that tribe, I was fortunate enough to meet Debbie Gilbert, who's here today. And she has pushed and encouraged me, and this year helped me over the line with my book, which I wanted to write as a testimony to my lovely mum, who's 91, who has been my role model. And I hadn't really appreciated until I started doing my talks just how instrumental she had been in me being able to be financially empowered myself, and also my children. So I wanted to get it written for my mum. I took her a copy in her care home at the weekend, and she was very delighted to see her name in the book and to read her story. So a big thank you to all the contributors, because you have bared your souls, and all of you have said that if your story changes one woman's life, that will be an amazing result. So I'm very, very grateful to all of you. And I also want to say a big thank you to Claire here, Claire Ackers, because she's been pushing me and coaching me over the last 3 years. It's not always been easy, has it, Claire? It's been quite a journey, but here we are. So, and also just finally to mention someone, there's some lady in the room called Jo Wardle, and Jo and I had lunch in the summer, and she said to me, how do you go about writing a book? You know, where's your inspiration? And I think joining Sister Snog, there are so many of the sisters who've written their own books, and I think when you're surrounded by people who've done something that you want to do yourself, that gives you the extra motivation to do it. And I'm really grateful to all of them for their support. So thank you very much, and over to the panel.
Thank you, Diane. So the overarching question that we're talking about today is, why do so many women have barriers when it comes to talking about money? So we invited some key people in your life, I think, as well, but also people we felt would have an opinion on this topic to come and talk about some key questions. So we have Helen Oldham, who is the founder of Lifted Ventures, an early investment connector with Diversity Lens, and she's also head of trustees still of SmartWorks Leeds, co-chair of SmartWorks Leeds. We have Paula Myers. Hello, Paula, from Irwin Mitchell. She is the partner and director of legal services for private client services. She also contributed to the book with some of your legal expertise on wills. We have Sarah Ellis, who also contributed her story to the book. She's an award-winning theatre producer, actress, and the owner of Theatre Inspiring Change. And of course, you've heard from Claire Ackers already, who is a wonderful life coach and business coach with her business, Adesse Business Coaching. So this is our panel for today. The first question we are going to put to, I should have put my glasses on, to Helen Oldham. Helen, how have traditional gender roles and societal expectations influenced women's attitude towards discussing money?
Well, first of all, I just want to say a massive well done to Diane. I mean, I think that the book she's written is so important, and I think, you know, for all the reasons that you're about to hear about, but I know that it was a labour of love and took a long time, but she stepped into a very important space around which there is quite a big gap. And we didn't get a chance to give her a round of applause just now, did we? So I think we should all give her a round of applause. So, good question that I've been set by Diane here. So, this goes back a long way, doesn't it? When we think about the way that we were brought up. I was very fortunate because I'm one of 3 children. I'm the eldest, and my 2 siblings are brothers, and there's a little bit of an age gap between me and them. But I was pretty much taught by my dad at 4 that I would only get pocket money if I negotiated it. So I actually had to sit down at a table with him and explain why I deserved the pocket money and at what rate the pocket money should be set at. And this was an annual event, which I actually got to really look forward to. To start with, I thought it was really mean and horrible, to be honest. But over time, I grew to appreciate that. And then when my brothers came along, I had my pocket money at 4, or maybe 5, but they started getting pocket money at like 3 and 2 because of the age gap. So I was incensed by this, and I tried to get back pay. He didn't relent. He never gave me the back pay. So, and he also taught me about basic accounting because his background had been accounting. So I was immensely grateful to him for that. But beyond that, my financial education didn't extend. So he didn't talk to me about capital markets. He didn't talk to me about business finance. And actually, I have learnt most of that probably in the last 6 years since I came out of my big corporate job. So typically, research says that men and women have different relationships with money, and they're all the things that you probably know and expect. Men, and apologies to the men in the room, I know this is a stereotype and it's not true of all people. In fact, most of my close male friends, this is not true of, but a lot of men associate money with status and with success, and that's how they measure their lives. And I actually live with someone who's just retired, and I think what he's finding the hardest is not having that regular income coming in that he can associate his worth in the world with. Whereas women tend to look at money as being, first of all, security, but also access to freedom, choice, those kind of things. So right from the beginning, we've got very hardwired different perspectives about what money can do for us. And yet love and money are the framework, aren't they, through which we can see the whole of our lives, or our everyday lives. So there's some big differences about the way we see things. And in my world, which is early stage investment, there are very few women who actually get involved in that sector because they have no knowledge of it, because women tend to be a bit more risk conscious. I would not say adverse. I just think they're more aware of it, and therefore that they need more education around how to be successful in all types of investment. But I was looking at some of the statistics, and it says that ask the question, have you got any investment at all? 36% of men said that they didn't, but 55% of women said they didn't. So there's a big gap around the way that we use our money, particularly as we get a bit older. Women are brilliant at doing things like household finance, but it's what happens beyond that. So I would say that those are probably the biggest issues that we face, and there are lots of different statistics that show you how that shows up in the world. I'll just give one more example. There's a big piece of research that says that the way that women see inflation and economic prosperity is quite often linked to food inflation, because that's what they're seeing most frequently in the supermarket. They will know whether prices have gone up or not. And so therefore, for a broad range of women, they tend to overestimate what the impact of inflation might be in the future. And then that therefore impacts on their investment decisions going forward. So there's some quite nuanced and complex things around the way that we see money. Those are sort of broad population characteristics. You know, I know that there's lots of amazing women in this room who probably are doing some great things with their money. But, you know, taken as a whole, that's what we can see.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you, Helen. So, Claire, let's talk about self-esteem and imposter syndrome.
So first of all, let me say I have got all the imposter syndrome sitting on this panel with these lovely ladies. So thank you so much for inviting me. So imposter syndrome. First and foremost, what is it? So it's estimated in the most recent study that up to 82% of women, professional women, struggle with imposter syndrome, which is an incredible statistic. And it's just, what is it? It's a feeling of being a fraud. It's a feeling of being a phony. It's a feeling that someone's going to come and tap you on the shoulder and say, who the hell are you? Sorry, there's been a mistake. Can you go to the back of the queue? And so many women struggle with it. And I have been teaching on imposter syndrome since 2007. And I've helped literally hundreds of women, some of whom are in this room. I won't point you out, but some of whom are in this room. And it absolutely is possible to get rid of imposter syndrome. And first of all, I want to be really clear that there is a really good reason that we struggle with imposter syndrome. It's because we are imposters. We are still, by and large, operating in a patriarchal society. Education, society, the economy, political system, they, by and large, have been set up by middle-aged white men to serve middle-aged white men. And so sometimes we feel like we're being locked out of conversations or not welcome in a room. It's because that room wasn't built for us, and I think that's really important to acknowledge. And I think there is an opportunity there to build our own rooms and start our own conversation. Thank you. Let's talk about imposter syndrome and low confidence when it comes to money. And I'd like to start off just by sharing a little story, because it all starts with the stories, the narrative, the meaning that money was given when we were kids. So I grew up with a very traditional engineering father with Victorian values. He came from a mining family up in Newcastle, very traditional. And he very much, literally and subconsciously, gave me the story that women don't understand money. He earned the money. My mum stayed at home. She gave up quite a glittering career in Strasbourg in the Council of Europe to raise a family. And he would sit down with his spreadsheets and his Financial Times at the weekends and say, don't bother about this, you won't understand it. And then fast forward to my career, and I was earning quite a bit of a decent salary in my 20s and early 30s. And I didn't have a clue what to do with it. And I had a lot of fun, but it wasn't necessarily making wise decisions. And then in my first business, now this is really raw and honest, but I abdicated all responsibility to my co-director, who happens to be my husband. And he didn't necessarily do a good job of managing the business finances. And then I decided enough was enough. That it was enough of letting my imposter, enough of letting my lack of confidence around money rule the show. And I went away and I got educated, which is why this book by Diane is so important, having access to resources like this so we can educate, so we can empower ourselves. And it turns out that I love managing the money. I really, really enjoy it, and I am bloody good at it. And I gave away my power for years because I was letting my imposter rule the show.
It's really good. It's a really great story to share, Claire. And so how can people work on improving their self-confidence?
So the first step is being aware of and rewriting the stories that you grew up with. So mine was girls don't understand money. And it's linked to the whole good girl, high achiever archetype. It absolutely is possible to rewrite those stories in being aware of your origin story and the limiting beliefs that what your imposter is saying to you, basically. There is a 5-step process, which I won't bore you with all now, but if anyone's interested, feel free to grab me afterwards and we can talk about it. But it starts with taking responsibility for your own shit, as Diane says, taking your power back around it, and get educated. Like I say, this book is important. There's loads of books out there. There's loads of podcasts out there. There's no excuse for letting your power go around your financial stuff. We need to normalise conversation around money. what it means to be a wealthy woman, what it means to have money, what it means to take control of money. You know, there's this whole good girl story that girls don't talk about money. We don't discuss salaries, we don't celebrate being wealthy. And I think it's really important that we change that conversation, build our own rooms, like I say, and start our own conversations around it.
Brilliant, thank you. Can you pass the mic to Sarah now? So, Sarah contributed her story into the book. We just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the emotions that can come with money, the fear of lack, the guilt, all of those things. So I wanted you to share some of your thoughts on that and how people can overcome that.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got some things to say about sexism, surprisingly, because I run a theatre company that is all about changing stereotypes and prejudice and discrimination. And I feel like the biggest imposter here because I'm crap with money. I've always been crap with money. And at the age of 55, I'm paying the bill, as it were, for it. But I had some thoughts about things, so I've written them down, which I did want to share with you. Because I was running a workshop this week, and a woman said to me, "I've never experienced sexism." And it really got me thinking, because I didn't understand how that was a thing. You know, there's still a gender pay gap, presumption of women's ability to earn and make good money without compromising their real role, their priority as a family maker, the stereotypes around what a good woman is, I've written here, so we're all speaking from the same place, and what a reasonable woman is. Be reasonable. I always think that's a really powerful word for us. But the other side of it is this idea that we've done feminism, you know, that we're in an era where feminism is labelling us as uptight or unreasonable or militant in some way, which would be great if things were sorted, but I don't think that they are. Things aren't sorted yet. And I guess what I wanted to talk about with the question is how much there is still sexism, institutionalised sexism, but also internalised sexism. Really, it's picking up on some of the stuff you've already said. So although there might be a heavily scented air of equality and people talking about equality, the reality is that the patriarchy is alive and well. So, okay, this might seem a bit random, but did you know that racism, which is a hate or a prejudice or a stereotype against people of a certain particular racial or of a particular racial or ethnic group, is a hate crime? Did you know that misogyny, which is a discrimination, contempt and hate for women, is not a hate crime? I'm just going to shove that in just for us to think about. There it is. But I did want to bring these kind of massive issues down to the personal. How do they affect our guilt, our fear and our insecurities? So if we're taking in these sexist messages and beliefs, there's an idea that maybe women are inferior, whether we want to admit it or not, it is still out there. And we're surrounded by lots of things that back that up, yeah? So it seeps into our psyche. We put ourselves down, and perhaps our role in finances gets put down as well, because I believe that sexism, the root of it is that we are never good enough. So with all the things you've talked about, Diane, in your book, and all the things that we're talking about up here, if we feel like we're never good enough, how are we going to change that? Looking at magazines, have you noticed that, you know, we talk about shopping and budgeting and, saving, whereas, I don't know, how many men read things like that? Aren't they always talking about, like, investing and wealth, etc.? I'm female. I bought a car. Can I swear? No. Outrageous experience. There you go. Talk to the men around you. Did they have that experience? Yeah. I was told that a certain type of car didn't exist. Amazing. I'd literally just seen it on the internet. I went with a boyfriend. He stayed in the same showroom as they tried to sell him a car. I went to 8, leaving with a brochure. I'd lasted about 37 seconds in each one of them. I wasn't smart enough to buy a car, clearly. A man should always pay on the first date. We do an awful lot of work with teenagers. It's out there, it's still real. They tell me that the guy should pay on the first date. Again, what's that about, you know? Another bit of a thing that makes me go crazy mad is this idea that she took all his money when people divorce. She took all of his money. And I defrag this in a lot of the work that I do, and it's just still there. I found some stats which will back up what you've said. 23% of women take the lead in their finances. 53% defer to their spouse to make long-term money decisions. But 85% of women are in charge with the day-to-day finances. So if we can't be trusted with the bigger stuff, why on earth are we being trusted with the smaller stuff? Smaller, inverted commas, you know. Division of labour at home whilst you're working. We haven't got time for that one. So, the consequence, and talking about fear, is that it can be crippling if the relationship breaks down, yeah? Who remembers Anastasia singing Being Left Outside Alone? Well, yeah. How many times do we hear? How many times do we feel that fear of us not having that backup if we break up with someone? I arrived into my first marriage with no money. I'd been to drama school. I was going to save the world. I still don't have much money because I still want to save the world, and that's cool. That's my decision. But because I arrived in that marriage with no money, there was an underlying insecurity that I deserved anything, even though I was the one that brought our 2 children up wonderfully, thank you. Also, created an award-winning theatre company. He was unemployed for most of the time we were together, but he started off with money. So when we left, it still felt like it wasn't my money. That's got to change. I'm running out of time, aren't I, Debbie? Sorry. This is why I wrote it down. Being brought up by mum and dad, you've both made references to that. They were hard-working class people, yeah? But they always talked about not having enough money. The fear was ingrained in me. So I felt like I didn't know about money. I didn't have enough of it. I was scared and I was going to get it wrong. I was disempowered. I focused on my mistakes with money or my lack of knowledge. So how do we change that? Because I'm all about changing things. I think my message today really is the internalized sexism that we perhaps have and that we are handed, possibly on a regular basis, it's not our fault. It's okay. Let's sometimes sit back and take the pressure off of being a kick-ass woman. And no, we don't put up with that anymore. Equality, equality. Actually, sometimes it's okay to say, this is really freaking hard. Because all the stuff that's happening around me in my head is kind of contrary. That doesn't mean we stay there, Diane, thank goodness, for people like you. Yeah? We're not bad, we haven't failed, but we can recognise and address it. Recognise that misogyny and sexism. Address it, yeah? See it for what it is. Look at our learned beliefs. And think about the things that we've held on to which are no more use for us, frankly. It might have brought us acceptance and approval. It might have made us feel safe because that's what society expected. And for some of us, adhering to these guidelines kept us safe from aggression or retaliation. We mustn't forget that. But it's 2023, right? Enough now. Let's own our power and our influence. Let's build our own acceptance, belonging and safety, free of this gender crap. Use our voices to educate, use our voices to change policies and politics. And in a huge, loud, acting voice, or in a small, determined, incredible voice, and everything in between. Believe in our worth, abilities, competence, and in our power. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Paula, you're on the front line dealing with marital breakups, people who've lost their loved ones. So what are the gender differences that you find as a lawyer, and how do we come through that?
Well, first of all, thank you, Diane, and well done. And I've bought the book for my daughter, who's 19, who I hope will read it and have the benefit that I think I didn't have, and probably many people in this room. So going back to what I do, I mean, at the moment, women live longer than men. So there's a little bit of me thinking, well. And so the cases that we see day to day are either that the woman has been left behind, the husband earned the money, they're the homemaker. And they're often, I see a lot of this, Diane will know, a lot of women who they just don't know what to do with money. They don't know how to cope. They don't know how to make decisions. I remember with my own parents, when my father died, my mum didn't know how to get to the airport. And actually, she'd sat in the car on the way to the airport all that time, but just hadn't taken it in, didn't know what to do with the cash. She'd never paid the bills. And I see this a lot in the work that we do. So we deal, whether this will change, whether it does in my lifetime, because I think women are now in the boardroom, they are having careers, they are working. Will the stress of that impact on women's health? I don't know, so that it changes the life expectancy. But for the moment, the cases that we deal with, you're often dealing with women who they're vulnerable because they don't understand. And they're also afraid to ask, and to ask for permission. And so I probably explained before, some of you will have come to these events. I remember one case that we did where it was a third marriage, but it was a marriage of 25 years. And whilst they didn't have children together, they had children between them from previous relationships. And she had a very nice type of life, she will say, but was always given pocket money. And when he died, he left a will that gave her £25,000, which frankly wouldn't have kept her in shoes. And he was dying, and she consulted with him about it. She actually was one of the few ones, probably why I remember the case, who said, is this going to be enough? How have you done this? Am I going to be okay? And his response to that was, well, it's nothing that a good lawyer won't sort out for you. So he'd bottled that, but it left her in a situation where she just didn't have enough money to live and was actually fighting with the grown-up children from his first and second marriage. And we see that a lot. And there is that fear factor, and whether it's from magazines, whether it's from treatment that you've had, in the professional workplace. I'm very fortunate that the firm I work for now really celebrates women, and the majority of our partnership is women, which is unusual. But through the years, I remember having people say to me when I was going off on maternity leave, if you apply for partnership, don't expect any special treatment, or we're not going to talk to you about promotion because you've got other things on your mind now, like your children. And finding out over time, this is sort of 20 years ago, that male colleagues were doing the same job but earning £15,000, £20,000 more. And we've had to go through that to break down those barriers, really. I think they're still there. I know we're going to talk a little bit about the gender pay gap. And in a way, it'd be lovely not to sit on a panel where we have to talk about that actually it just isn't an issue. But it still is. And so a lot of our clients, particularly with the wills disputes, are generally women because they've been left behind and need some help. And it's okay to ask for that help. And it's great to see them flourish, and some who've kept in touch and actually rebuilt their lives, careers. They've got a brain. And it's important that they're able to use it.
So what would you recommend women do
Talk.
To protect themselves?
I think seek advice, get proper advice, because we all have our own expertise. I'm a lawyer, I'm not a financial advisor. I need to take proper advice to understand that, and then at least you're informed and you're educated. But I do also get that for some women, and probably not people in this room who want to change, who are very driven, we've got to try and help those women who find it really hard to walk into a room like this. And I've had some clients where we've invited them to events and they've said, I can't walk into that room. That's what I find really hard. And so we've also got to be there for those women to help them get to a stage where they can walk into the room, or they walk into the room in a different way.
Thank you. That's brilliant. Thank you. You just grab that. So, Diane, let's talk about fear of judgment.
Around money.
Around money.
So I think, in my experience, a lot of women are on the back foot when it comes to planning. They believe that money is something that someone else should sort out for them. And they're very lacking in confidence to ask those questions. And so, what was very interesting to me during lockdown is that I would always have had face-to-face meetings with my couples. And those conversations would be very animated. But during lockdown and on Zoom, the wives or partners just sat there and said nothing. And the husbands did all the talking, or the male partners, and did all the deciding. And I was really really, really shocked by that. And one of the reasons the overriding reason that I've been so passionate about this my whole career is, and her story is in the book, but we've changed her name. But I was introduced by a lawyer like Paula to this lady. I mean, I want to say a little old lady, but she was probably my age at the time. But she seemed like a little old lady. And I went to see her, and she started telling me her story. And she said, I took my partner's name. So she said, I thought that was going to be okay. And we had this lovely life. We lived in this beautiful house, and we ran the British Gas Sailing Club together. And one day he was mowing the lawn, and he died in the garden. And he died without a will. So immediately his pension died with him. And 7 days after his death, his children came and threw her out the house. She was homeless. And I was like a really new financial advisor then, and actually the worst thing of all was I knew the kids. We were at school together. I couldn't obviously tell her that. So, she had to go through the courts, and she got some money to buy a small little house. But it just stuck in my mind at the time. How could somebody be in that situation? And she was in that situation because she didn't know what she didn't know. And my passion for setting this up, and one of the drivers in my financial career, is to encourage women to understand what they don't know and to feel safe and to be able to talk about that. And the reason why we wanted to put the stories in the book is we felt they would resonate with women who could say, that could be me. In fact, somebody actually emailed me and said, I was almost one of the case studies in your book. Because I didn't know what I didn't know. And when you talked to me about not having a shareholder agreement and what might happen, I didn't even know that I needed a shareholder agreement. And my business partner went on holiday, and he had a pulmonary embolism, and he nearly died. And I was thinking, God damn it, I could be in Diane's book now. So, we need to create a safe space for women to feel that they can talk about money. As mothers of daughters, we need to encourage our daughters to be more financially aware and to break down some of those stereotypes. And that is so important. And when I set on this journey, and I hadn't really appreciated it, I don't think, but, my mother, bless her, was just such a trailblazer in the 60s and instilled in me this feeling that I had to be responsible for myself. I couldn't rely on a man because she couldn't rely on my dad. She was always telling me that, which was not very helpful. And she was always saving money. Every Friday there was a knock on the door and there would be a man collecting £5, or she was terrified of dying and us not being able to bury her. And those messages were so important to me as a little girl. And if you don't have those messages and you don't have that confidence, or you don't have that space to feel that it's okay to say, I don't really understand this, explain it to me. It's absolutely fine. We need to help women feel that they can say that with confidence, and that there are people out there who can help them. I mean, on the downside of that, I'm terrified of running out of money because of my mum. So I'm always questioning whether I've got enough money, and my kids keep saying, just spend it, for God's sake. You've got enough. So those things, we're going to talk about limiting beliefs actually after lunch, but those things really do impact. We've all said, haven't we, things that have impacted on us when we were kids. So we really need to be mindful about the language that we use when we've got little children. I'm looking at some of you in the room who've got little children. The language that we use, whether we've got sons or daughters, around money. But we need to create safe spaces for women to feel empowered to say, I don't understand this, can you help me? And that's really why I wanted to write the book, because the people that have contributed their stories want to help the people that read it to understand that it's okay and that there is somewhere that they can go and get that advice.
Helen, do you have any thoughts on the fear of judgment that women experience as a barrier to talking about money?
That's a good question. I think we all find it difficult to talk about money. I know that there's some research that says that women are more likely to want to talk about death than to talk about money. So I think the statistic is 85% of women felt comfortable talking about death with other women, but only 65% of them felt comfortable talking about money, which is crazy, isn't it? We'd rather talk about death than money. And I think the fact that we haven't had those conversations from early childhood is a significant barrier to the way, to our fear of judgment about it. Typically, women don't talk about the way that they manage their money with each other either. But I was really encouraged to see some statistics that say that you're 50% more likely to want to talk about it with other female people, with other women around you as well, which is why I think this conversation is so important. It's a safe space, and this is where we start, isn't it?
Can we have a show of hands? Who feels comfortable about talking about money? It's about half, about half the room, so that's about right, isn't it?
This is Diane's community, though, isn't it? So we're like a particularly enlightened group.
Claire, any thoughts around the fear of judgment when it comes, as a barrier to talking about money?
I think it comes back to those stories, isn't it? And anybody who's been in my world for any length of time will be familiar with the question of what am I making it mean? And it's being aware of that little voice in your head that says, good girls don't talk about money. Or in my first job, actually, it was a sackable offence to discuss what your salary was.
Yeah, I was in a job like that too.
Welcome to the recruitment world. But yeah, it's the fear of judgment, and it's that, I don't know if you've ever had that feeling, but that feeling when you realise that you're on the back foot with money. Like, I've got a client who realised that the previous incumbent in her job, and she's got a big job, was being paid 35 grand more than her. And the feeling that she had when she realised that, but HR told her there was nothing that she could do. And so fear of judgment, it's just having rooms like this is so, so important, where we can just normalise it and lean into those conversations, because there is such a power in hearing me too, that other people are feeling the same way as you, but also that there are people who have been through it and have got some advice.
Judgment, being judged when talking about money?
Yeah, I love when you say lean into. I think that's really crucial. For me, I think it's a conversation about shame as well. And that opening up those conversations so that we don't kind of sit back and feel that, but rather kind of think about, okay, that's interesting. Why am I feeling that? Why is this a slightly shameful thing? And I think it's back to those roots that I said, which is about not being enough and not feeling enough. Not feeling that you are enough. And if we can sort that stuff out, I think it will really help. But yeah, shame is a big word and a big feeling. And I think it's worth leaning into that and just going, okay, interesting. Where's that come from? Why am I feeling that?
But I think because there is still the gender pay gap, we've still got that. There is still this issue, isn't there, Paula, where people, I think, are fearful of talking about money and being judged for that.
And I think women are outside of their comfort zone in asking for money. And I've heard really from friends who are female who might have plucked up the courage to raise with their boss, can we talk about money, and can we talk about a pay rise, or can we talk about how much we're going to be paid for a certain role? And one friend was told, well, surely it's not all about the money. There's more to life than money, and surely it's about the job and status and what it will bring. And I thought, well, that's maybe true, but that was a real shutdown to make her feel very guilty about asking. And I think she was really, it shut her down completely. She wasn't able to have that conversation again. So I think there is that fear, but we've just got to keep doing it, because ultimately, we're all. How many stories have we heard where you've got women doing exactly the same job, probably performing better, but paid less? And one of the things I made a promise to myself was that I didn't want my daughter, or I didn't want the younger generation coming through my teams having that. We've got a really open and transparent process. And actually, I've never felt like a woman, which is a weird thing to say, but it's because I've never had in my current job anyone make me feel lower for that. And I know because I control some of the pay for my own team, it's just not a consideration. But I don't think that's the same everywhere.
No, it's not.
So.
We've got a couple of minutes. Would anyone like to either ask the panel a question or share something that they would like to talk about regarding money? You're all like, no. Thank you. Let me just grab the mic.
Thank you. I just want to come back. It's just a very, very brief little thing, but I bought a new car this weekend, went into the showroom with my husband, and still, not only did they call me Mrs. Bell, and I said to my husband, we have to leave now because I'm not Mrs. Bell, but also the assumption was that it was his new car. And so all the paperwork was given to him, and they looked at him, and they directed all the questions at him, and I was in the background like this. And then my husband was like, here you go, here's your car to me. And it just everything you were saying, and I didn't really think about it at the time, apart from being a bit like, oh, this is awful. But actually, it was awful, and I feel like I should go back to that showroom and just...
You should feed it back, actually.
Yeah, because it wasn't great, and I'm not Mrs. Bell, so that was the first thing.
I sent it back to Fiat, and they were furious with me. So I went in and said it back to them.
I think
I've got money for a car. What's your job? Selling cars. Brilliant.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So that the money was my money. It was, I paid it anyway, and so I need to be a bit more like Claire and just embrace.
Yes.
And
Yes. No financial sense. Yes.
No.
Anyone else got any other stories they want to share?
Just relatable to your story, my friend was a salesperson at an Audi branch in Lincolnshire, and she eventually felt that she had to leave because she was getting such disrespect from all of her other male sales team members, and they just because she was a female, they kept telling her, you don't know how to sell a car, you're not going to be any good at this job. And she stayed, and the problem was the manager in the branch wasn't backing her up. He was actually supporting the other sales members, and she just eventually had to leave because she just was made to feel so much lower than the rest of the team just because she was female. And
is this recently?
You can't tell her. We're probably talking about 5 years ago, so not long
recently.
time ago, but yeah, about 5 years ago.
That saddens me because I left my corporate role in 1998 after being taken out for lunch by the director and said, I was a supervisor and the managerial position came up, and he said, I would give you the role, but you've got a child. So I'm really sorry, I'm going to give it to Tony instead. I hope you're okay with that. But of course, in 1998, I was just grateful to have a job and didn't really think about taking them to court. But it saddens me that we're still in this situation 25 years later. Hannah.
I call myself first she can prosper baby or something.
You can.
Hi everyone, I'm Hannah. I'm other things, but also Diane's daughter, if you don't know me. One thing that hasn't been picked up, which I feel really passionate about, and I have a great group of girlfriends, and I'm probably the person that they hate the most when it comes to this stuff, because I'm like, have you got a will? Have you got life insurance? Come on. Is education for children in general. I am astonished that I have conversations with my incredibly bright friends, one of whom Mum will know exactly who I'm talking about, is a criminal barrister. She's probably the cleverest person I know. And I had to explain to her at the age of 30 what compound interest was. She's got 2 degrees. How can we get people who are, going through education, who are clearly very bright, not learning stuff like that at school? You should know about that stuff. Before you enter the world. How can you be expected to ask for a salary increase if you don't understand how much money you need to pay a mortgage, what interest rates are, all that stuff? It's really important, I think. So
yeah, it's a good one to raise. Yeah. Oh, got another one over here. Thank you, Hannah.
Can I just expand on what Hannah's just said there in terms of education? We've all commented about the fact that you're getting a book and you're going to give it to your daughters, and we want our own girls, which has been mentioned a lot in here, to understand what's going on. What about the boys?
Yeah, get one for the boys as well.
Come on now.
Yeah.
Let's educate our boys, not just about finance, but about misogyny and about behaviours.
Yeah.
So I think it's a topic for a different day, but I think it's equally as important.
No, it's a really valid point that you've raised there. Totally agree. There's another hand up. Thank you. Burn a few calories today. Stay up this end.
Hi there.
Okay.
So I just wanted to bring up an area where I work in, where most women are self-employed. The industry, it's not the area that I work in is mainly women. And over the years, I have noticed that a lot of women in this area have failed in their business, and it is to do with feeling unconfident about money. Now, I in my small way, do try to kind of write that, because I also do some education, but it really is outstanding that I would say 80% of women who are self-employed in my area fail in their business because of their attitude towards money.
Wow. Yeah.
At the early stage of their business, which is a significant gap compared to male founders. And that's why when you hear all the statistics from the Rose Review, you'll probably have heard that 2% of VC funding goes to women. And even co-led teams, so where there's a woman in the team, it's still only 14%, which is a very small amount of the capital flowing to early stage businesses. And the answer to that is around education. It's about educating women in early stage businesses and all businesses about capital finance, all types of finance, and how to access those. Because we know that once they're given the finance, and a lot of the women in this room are testament to this, they're more likely to be successful. So in all-time investment, actually, I think Forbes will look at an investment portfolio and showed that a woman is likely to get 25% better returns over 30 years in a broad investment portfolio than a guy. And the same with female founders. They're far more likely to be driving businesses that are revenue generative. So I think something like 25% more revenue generated inside a business where there's a woman co-founder. So it's in our interest to make sure that we're educating and extending invitations to women in all of those situations to get that education.
Wow. Right. Well, thank you for that insight. And thank you to all of our panel. It's clear that there's a lot more discussions and a lot more actions that are needed. Would you like to say any final words?
Well, I mean, I agree with everything that that all the panellists have talked about. And yes, we do need to keep... I take on board what you're saying, Lynn. We absolutely do need to get our boys to be more financially educated. I think my son is quite financially educated. I think he's had to be. So, yeah, we have a responsibility, whether we've got sons or daughters, to make sure that they really do understand. Things sound far more complicated than they actually need to be. And we all need to do our bit to help with that. And I'd just like to say thank you. It's been very challenging, the conversation. So thank you for the panel for that. And
we are now going to get Helen to share a bit about SmartWorks Leeds, our charity for today.
Yes, I think I'm going to move from the wobbly chair, because every time I speak, I feel like I'm about to fall off it. Confessions from the front there. So I'm just really delighted that Diane's asked SmartWorks Leeds to be involved in today's event. I know I spoke at the event in Alton Hall, didn't I? Was that the first one?
Yeah.
So, I feel immensely privileged to get this opportunity to speak again, but also to see how much She Can Prosper has grown since then. And the fact that the book's been published is super amazing. So briefly, SmartWorks Leeds is an organisation which supports unemployed women in Yorkshire. Typically, the clients that we help, 50% of them come from diverse backgrounds, 45% of them are single parents, 25% of them have been employed for 2 years or more and had more than 50 interviews. Typically, they're spending 26 hours a week applying for jobs. So these are people who come from a variety of backgrounds. We have a really good relationship with the women's prisons in Yorkshire, and quite often see women who are about to come out of open prisons back into the mainstream world. And clearly that opportunity to get a job and be economically independent is absolutely vital in that transition. We've seen a huge amount of Ukrainian women as well who've come over to the UK. A lot of them settled in Leeds and Yorkshire and are finding that they don't have the connections to get the career opportunities that they would have had in the Ukraine. We are also very interested in those areas where life is particularly challenging, and there are areas in Leeds and Bradford where life expectancy has actually decreased in the last 5 years. If you look at the Joseph Rowntree statistics, they'll tell you that life expectancy for women has actually gone down by 5 years, versus life expectancy for women in more affluent areas, which has actually gone up. So it's our role to help those particular women, and we do that through something really simple but hugely powerful. And that is that we provide unemployed women with a set of clothes to wear at an interview. And if you're from a prison environment, you only have 14 sets of clothes, and that includes your pants and your socks. So it can be particularly vital to have that set of clothes. We all know how clothes make you feel. It can really change, how you show up. We talked about walking into a room, Paula. It can help you step into that space. But more importantly, we also provide some coaching. So we take our women clients through how to answer interview questions. We talk to them about transferable skills. We help them fill in CVs. But as you can probably tell from all the things I said, I'm a really sort of outcomes, target-driven type of person. What attracted me to the charity in the first place is they track outcomes really closely. And around 70% of all the women that we help at SmartWorks Leeds actually go on to get a job after seeing us. So it's a massive conversion, particularly given the background that or the route that they've taken to come through to us. But I would say the SmartWorks magic is actually that those women leave the room knowing that we care. We want them to succeed. We want to know what's happened in that interview journey. We want to know what the result is. And for a lot of women, they don't have that at home. They don't have that in their community. So knowing that they've got us stood behind them, wanting and willing them to succeed is a big part of the intervention. We're based in Leeds. I was actually one of the co-founders right back at the beginning of when we started, and typically we saw 19 women in a month. We're now seeing over 80. We're on track to see 1,000 this year. I wish it was 10,000. Maybe in a few years' time, 1,000. And, we really appreciate everybody who's supported us in that journey, and particularly Diane and this community. We've got a raffle coming up. You can win a weekend away, chocolates and flowers. So please do have a look at the raffle. Just on the bar as well, you'll see information about our fashion sale that's coming on December the 6th, which is always worth a visit, and also details about the collective, which is a way of actually getting connected to our community over the next 12 months. But just thank you very much for inviting us to be here today. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you. And Hannah is here from SmartWorks. I'm trying to see where she is. She's at the back. She's going to come round and sew you some raffle tickets over lunch. So we're going to go into the main room for lunch. If you go out of that door there and back into the main door, there is a seating plan as you go in, so you can see where you're sitting. If you were a contributor to the book, we'd love you to stay behind because we'd like to get a photograph of all our contributors and our panels. So please stay behind. And then we're going to have some lunch and then a talk after lunch and the raffle. Okay? Do you want to add anything else, Diane? No? Well, there you go. Thank you, everyone.